started. I just want to welcome everybody to our meeting and our second training with the father flaming the. What is it again, Mark?
This is the Fatherhood Flame.
There you go. Thank you.
We're not here to flame any fathers.
No, that would be really bad. Yeah. This is the second part of this. If you want to see the first part, you can go to the JWB website and it's been added there. We'll make sure we get a link and put it in the chat so that you can see that. It was a great training, so if you have time, go ahead and see it also. That's going to be the first part of our meeting. And then the second part, we'll just talk about our cloud collaborations and any updates that we have. And without further adu, Mark, would you like to introduce your group and get us started?
Sure, thank you. We're going to kind of start our session today with Lawrence Claremont is going to give us a little welcome and a little overview, and after that we have an awesome survey that we're going to offer up so that we can kind of see where everybody stands, what your thoughts are. And then we have a couple of videos and we'll end up with an activity and a chance to share some thoughts. I think that Lawrence, I've heard him practicing in the background. I think he's ready to begin speaking. And so here we go.
All right, thanks, Mark. I just wanted to start out with just a brief intro to what we'll be doing today. And I wanted everyone to just focus on that, father involvement has increased dramatically over this past several decades. And simultaneously, the roles of fathers in their families has evolved from conceptions of fathers as being distant breadwinners to a more holistic recognition that they are equal co-parents. Now, there's still work to be done, so that programs and services are geared towards strengthening the role of dads in the upbringing of their children. And that's one of the reasons that the Pinellas Fatherhood Collaborative was, created. Now, the collaborative serves to magnify the voice of Pinellas County fathers and equip them with the tools needed to positively impact the lives of their children and their communities. And the mission of the collaborative is to work in partnership with stakeholders to promote father-inclusive community resources that will equip dads with the tools they need to shine in their caregiver role. And you might be wondering, how is this achieved? Well, there's 4 key things that the collaborative does. We listen to the voices of fathers. We train professionals who work with fathers. This will be a good example today. We offer resources designed specifically for fathers and by eliminating barriers and biases for fathers. And we do this work because we fully understand and believe that dads make a difference.
So we're going to put a poll up on the screen now, and there's 5 questions. I think they're all going to display at the same time. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of walk you through the questions. It's not going to take long. They're short answers, nothing that you have to type out, just kind of like not a yes or no, but short answer type questions. So when Jamie's ready, we'll put the poll up, and if you could kind of work your way through, I'll maybe read the questions as we go, and we'll spend maybe a moment or so on each of the questions and see if we can get through this. I think, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, at the end, are you going to be able to show some results to the group, or should we wait till the end of the session?
It's up to you. I can briefly show the results to the group right after the polls, and then I know we'll talk about the results at the end of the session. And as a reminder, all of your votes on the poll are anonymous. All right, here we go.
Thanks. So first question, we want you to, kind of answer this from your perspective, from where you are today, from your thoughts. There's no right or wrong answer. This is just an impression, and it would be just helpful to kind of get your thoughts on this question. When I was young, and if I'm being totally honest, generally, my dad was, and then fill in the blank from the answers before, in my daily life, think about the day-to-day and then choose. Remember, be honest, your answers are totally confidential. There's one answer. Our second question, thinking back to when you were young, would you say that your dad was fully and actively engaged and present in your life overall? Not necessarily every day, but overall. One answer. I'm on number 3. Generally speaking, if you had to choose only one, is an actively engaged dad most important for? Answer number 1, definitely a son. Number 2, probably a son, probably a daughter, or definitely a daughter. Only one answer, and this is just your first impression. Number 4, generally speaking, if you had to choose only one answer, is an actively engaged dad most important for kids aged, and pick one, 0 to 3, early learning, elementary school age, middle school age, high school, or post-high school? And what age group do you think an actively engaged dad is most important? Last question, number 5. This one's similar, but a little opposite. Generally speaking, if you had to choose one and only one, is an actively engaged dad least important for kids aged, again, this is least important for this age group, 0 to 3, early learning, elementary, middle, high school, or post-high school? At which age is an actively engaged dad least important?
Looks like almost everyone has answered. All right, everyone has participated.
And I
Awesome
was
job.
last.
I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, interesting results for question 1. And I think that if we kind of looked at our society today, this is probably pretty representative. Number 2, interesting results from this group. So like, I'm kind of interested in seeing the results. Question number 3, most important for a son, most important for a daughter, probably. And yeah, 47%, definitely a son. Question number 4, at what age is an actively engaged father most important? Kind of evenly split. And number 5, at what age is an actively engaged dad least important? I think maybe as we look at the question before, we probably could have predicted that post-high school would be most people's answer for this one. Okay. Thank you all for participating. That kind of sets the stage for it. I think that we want to kind of maybe come back to this poll at the end, and maybe as we've watched the video and talked a little bit about what actively engaged fathers and dads look like, we may be able to put a little more perspective on this poll. So thank you very much. And we have, I think Jamie has a video queued up for it. We're going to show the first part, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little activity before we show the second part. So are we ready to go, Jamie?
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Catherine Eden.
My name is Dr. Jeffrey Johnson.
I'm Joshua Coleman.
I'm Dr. Ronald B. Mincy.
And this is our campfire story.
So my unique lens on the fatherhood movement is as an urban ethnographer. I ask fathers to tell me their whole life story And I really focus on how men conceive of fatherhood, changes in that conception over time, and the meaning that the fatherhood role has for the men that I have the privilege of talking with. My entire research career, there has been no group that I've studied that has been less popular in the public than low income and especially minority fathers. There's tremendous stigma out there. People think they know who these men are and what their attitudes and values are. You know, as a researcher, my job isn't to sort of adjudicate any of those claims. It's to go to the source and to hear from the dads. So when you ask dads, you know, tell me the story of your life, and you invite men into the space that they can narrate their own story. It's like an incredible experience. And so I think part of what I do is I bring those stories, or I bring that experience into the public discussions about fatherhood, rather than judge somebody who's judging their morality or trying to change men in some way. I'm a receiver of stories, and it's those stories that I've brought into the fatherhood movement. They're not stories that practitioners haven't heard before, but by distilling hundreds and hundreds of these stories systematically in communities across the U.S., Black, white, Latino, Asian men, uh, there are often insights to be gleaned from listening to men describe their own lives in their own ways.
My unique lens is that I have been practicing fatherhood work at all levels from the policy, research, and practice standpoint for 31 years. It's very important for incoming practitioners to understand the story before they got started, so that they're not reinventing the wheel and they're building upon best practice and promising practices.
My unique lens in the fatherhood space is that I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been in practice for 40 years. I specialize in parental estrangement and other conflicts in families. For the past 12 years, I've focused almost exclusively on the topic of parental estrangement. Adult children who want almost absolutely nothing to do with their adult children. My interest in this field came actually from a personal experience. I was married and divorced in my 20s and now have a fully grown daughter who I'm very close to. But there was a period of time in her early 20s where she cut off contact with me for several years. And it was easily the most painful, disorienting thing that I ever went to and never hope to go through again. And frankly, the advice I got out there is the same kind of advice that many therapists give to parents who are going through this, which is really counterproductive advice. Well, you just need to be assertive. You need to stand up to her. You need to remind her of all the ways that you were a good parent. Strategies that really make the situation much worse. So I eventually found my way back to my daughter through empathy, through taking responsibility, through not being defensive, through finding the kernel of truth in her complaints. And I wrote my first book on the topic, When Parents Hurt, about that. This perspective is very helpful in working with fathers, because fathers, even more than mothers, are at high risk of estrangement, especially once they separate from the mothers after a divorce or non-marital childbirth situations. So these are fathers who are in enormous pain, but often don't reach out for help for a variety of reasons, because of the feelings of shame, social isolation, masculinity. So the need to reach fathers who are going through this is very important and very profound.
My unique lens in the fatherhood space is that it's longevity. I've been doing this work for 27 years. I've focused on research, policy, and practice in the field of responsible fatherhood, helping to shape the national agenda, working in policy, working in basic research, and also working with practitioners on the ground who've been doing this work over that long period. This perspective is important in working with fathers, because we have to take the long view. We've made great advances in terms of giving fathers the skills with respect to parenting, with respect to getting along with their partners, and so that they can work more effectively with them. And so we have to take the long view in terms of what the field has accomplished and the work that lies ahead. And I think that's really important, particularly for practitioners who may be looking at their own local circumstances and seeing some victories and some losses. When we began to work in responsible fatherhood, the notion that you would provide services to fathers was unheard of. Today, you don't hear that conversation taking place at all. We really understand that in order to improve outcomes for children, we need mothers to be working more effectively as parents. We need mothers to be working, but we also understand that we need fathers to be making the same contributions to children's well-being. We also know that we need fathers to take better care of themselves so that they can be in the lives of their children.
According to my research, dads feel the father role comes in two packages. One is a provider package, and the other is a nurturer package. And oftentimes, especially with child support policy in the United States, we've really thought about fathers as breadwinners and not as nurturers. And so we've put a lot of emphasis on that paycheck portion, on the package of financial provision. Men think that's important too, but we know over time that we've made it very hard for men to accomplish the provider role in the way that they would like, and we've underinvested in men who often have tremendous capacity but few opportunities. We've emphasized breadwinning while at the same time underinvesting in men's ability to be breadwinners, and we've neglected nurture, which is tremendously important to men. It's a key source of meaning and identity to men. And when you bring these two things together, when you give fathers a chance to be full parents to their kids, and when mom gets the message that two parents are better than one and there's no substitute for dad, and you give men the opportunity to build their provider skills, that's the win-win. In my research, this is how I see these two factors playing out. Oftentimes men, when the child is born, their capacity to provide is pretty low. And but what you see is men, saying, "I'm responsible for the baby carriage, the baby coach. I'm going to get that. I'm going to get the car seat, and I'm going to bring the Pampers, right? And the onesies." And these items, which by the way don't get counted as child support because they're in kind, are very important for fathers because they're visible demonstrations of his love and care. And they're a message to the community. What they're saying to the larger community is, yeah, I'm the father of this child. I can't do much now, but I'm going to be there. I'm claiming this child as mine, and I'm demonstrating through these small items that I'm going to be there in the long term. And of course, the other thing about these items is they're quite literally what keeps a child alive when they're young. The Pampers, the onesies, the baby coach, the car seat. These are the things that a child feels and experiences at the deepest level when they're young. And as kids age, we see that manifesting in different ways. So when kids are in junior high and the peer pressure is on, it's the Jordans that are the really important thing, or the pair of designer jeans. One father told me, he had been incarcerated, and his child had called him and said, Dad, I was in school today and I looked down and I saw the jeans you bought me and the shoes that I have because of you. And I knew that you cared, even though you're not able to be with us. I knew that you cared. And so fathers are trying to use provision in really creative ways to send a message to children about how important they are and how loved they are. Healthy relationship education is really important for low-income parents who share a child. There are so many stresses in both the young man and the young woman's lives. And our research has shown that in some sense, nobody's for them. Often the extended family views her with suspicion. Maybe they view her as trifling, and her family may view him with suspicion. They may wonder if he's any good. And so these young couples are really under the gun. They're often unstably employed. They're struggling with housing. And in those situations, tempers flare. So how do we keep dad engaged and keep the tempers cool and get the mom and the dad to cooperate in the best interest of the child? So, this is co-parenting. How do you increase co-parenting competency? So what I've seen in the fatherhood programs that I've observed is a specific focus on giving couples skills. We teach people how to drive. We teach people, how to speak a foreign language. Similarly, co-parenting can be learned. Giving men skills that benefit the mother-father relationship, you're increasing the probability that fathers will remain engaged, because that conflict that comes when tempers flare doesn't get in the way. And so fathers come to parenting without the weight of that conflict.
When I first started this work, we really didn't have a really good handle on fatherhood, particularly as it relates to low-income men. And what we had to do is figure out first how to get them to come above the surface, because many of them were underground fathers, and that we really had to make a case to incentivize them to become above board and to begin to engage in a fatherhood program. And in order to do that, we had to understand what his needs were. His needs had to do with a job, the relationship with the child's mother. There was one great practitioner who said some time ago that when a father is not involved in a child's life, the assumption that you should have from the very beginning is that he wants to be there. And if you start from that premise, then you say, well, if he wants to be there and be engaged in the life of his child, what are the barriers that stand in the way of him doing that? You don't focus on the whole father needs as we started out with. You're losing. You're competing against the streets. You're competing against his immediate needs, because, say, for example, if a father has recently been incarcerated, not only is the fatherhood program providing case management to him, also his parole officer. And his parole officer is saying that you got to get a job, pretty quick. And he feels that pressure because he does not want to go back to jail. And so, and that's where we talk about collaborative case management, because it's very important that anyone serving a father program realize that that one program is probably not going to meet all his needs. So it's very important that the program collaborate with other community entities that will enable them to address the whole needs of that father. And if you can do that, you'll keep him retained in the program. And I think that the greatest downside for not responding to his needs is that he does not retain his involvement in the program, and then you can't succeed in his situation. And that is the direct opposite of what programs want to do.
The important factors that contribute to parent success are an ability to communicate, to resolve conflicts, to keep the well-being of children at the center of the family life. So often parents get involved in these kind of conflicts where they believe that they're going to try to get the child to ally with them against the other parent. And we know from the research that that's very difficult for children. It makes them feel feelings of disloyalty, guilt, anxiety, stress, and depression. So the parent's ability to be able to communicate through conflict, to resolve conflicts, to protect their children from those conflicts are critically important to child well-being. We know that the strongest predictor of involvement with the father and the child has to do with the relationship that they have with the mother post-separation. And I've absolutely seen that to be true over and over again in my work. If the mother is highly motivated to vilify the father, to keep him out of contact with the children, to malign him when the dad isn't around, to make visitation difficult, then dads tend to get more and more discouraged. Children tend to feel more distant from the father. They develop a narrative that the father should be avoided, that he's toxic, difficult, and that really erodes their attachment to them. So the mother as the gatekeeper is a very important development, but fathers also have a responsibility to communicate with the mother in a way that doesn't perpetuate that and put the children in the middle. The biggest insight that I have in terms of those who are seeking to improve the relationship is to really work on your own communication, how you manage your inner feelings of conflict, of disappointment, of hurt, of anger. The most critical thing to do is not to put your child in the middle. Even if you feel like your ex is doing a terrible job and maligning you and doing everything in her power to ruin your relationship with your child, the best, most loving, fatherly thing you can do is to not go there. Do not follow the other person into the weeds and into the mud. You want to be a bright, shining, loving light for your children. And that's actually the biggest predictor from my clinical work and my research in terms of dads who can maintain a relationship with their children over time, or those dads who don't malign the other parent, no matter how badly they're being treated.
That was good a few minutes ago. I would like to introduce Reggie Randolph to you. Reggie's going to kind of take it over for a minute here or two, and we'll do some introductions.
Thank you. My name is Reggie Randolph. I'm with the Healthy Families Father Services and Gold Medal Dads program. We're going to take a couple more minutes right now to talk about some of the things that we just saw in this last video. You can put your thoughts, comments in the chat line, or go ahead and just openly discuss what you saw and how what you felt about the information that was recently just shared with us. One of the things that stuck out to me was the researcher who talked about how fathers saw the two packages, the one as being a provider and the second one as being a nurturer. And that's one of the things that, as a father of two kids, one of my first acknowledgments in my job, I felt, was to be able to provide for them financially, and how not only financially, but to provide that stuff. And as I grew older, making sure that we often talked about providing for our children once we leave this place. And that's one of the things that stuck out most to me when I heard that from the researcher.
It's interesting because I kind of noticed the same thing, and a lot of times that I don't think fathers sometimes they get knocked down per se for wanting to be the providers because they're neglecting everything else. Whereas this was, acknowledging that even the incarcerated father that provided for his son acknowledged that was because of his dad. So, and what an important role it is that they are providers.
Great point there. Well, and one of the things is that as we continue to work with dads, that type of deal, being prepared to address some of these comments. I love the idea that the other researchers were saying how they meet the dads where they are and worked on those things that most are challenging in front of them. If I can't be able to nurture a child, if my bills aren't paid, or the lights are getting turned off in the house, that type of deal, and understanding some of those barriers.
Yeah, two things that stood out for me um, was the parental estrangement piece,
Mm.
and I mean that's a huge one that we come across. Being able to repair rupture, um, and definitely would want to learn more about uh, Dr. Coleman's work in that area, and then also mother as gatekeeper.
Mm.
Um, fathers who want to be involved but have a very difficult time establishing a healthy co-parenting relationship with mom is also pretty huge.
Sensio?
Hello.
How you doing? Fred actually had it.
I just wanted to just quickly add that I really appreciated when they spoke about the way in which fathers and mothers speak about one another in the presence of their kids or to their kids, and kind of that addressing that thing that I think probably happens, more often than anybody would like, or at least I've seen it happen plenty of times. Just having that awareness of not going the route of whatever the couple has or the ex couple has as issues with one another, to not put the kids in that scenario, because the relationship to your child is separate from the relationship to the father or the mother of the child. And so I just really appreciated them taking a little bit of time to talk more about that.
And there's one more that I wanted to add. I'm sorry. When he made the statement, if a father is not involved, assume he wants to be there, and then try to identify the obstacles to him being present. That's a very different way of thinking about it. And it was, in some ways, a little bit convicting because it's not necessarily uh, my starting point. Sometimes thinking that it's convincing someone that they want to be there, and he's right. In reality, a lot of the dads they do want to be present and just need um, some strategies on how to get there.
That's a really good point. I agree, because I think in the heart of most fathers, they want to be good fathers, and sometimes there's obstacles. Sometimes they don't know how to be a good father. Maybe they didn't have a good father, or maybe they are being the provider, so they're having a hard time being there present, in different things. So I think that's great. That's a good point.
Thank you, Joanne. One of the things that also kind of interests me is when he talked about the collaborative case management and how that was inclusive of the probation officer, the father program itself. But I think we can take that a little bit farther by including the medical, both physical and mental health for a father. Developing those type of networks where the dad can come into, let's say, a program here in Pinellas, and we have different contacts and services that we can refer him to, and come together as that collaborative case management to provide and decrease some of those opportunities for him to just disconnect from his family. So I thought that was a great point.
Yeah, and we have a couple of things in chat that I thought I would bring out too. Dads are important from the very start, and that's so true. I mean, mom and dad having that bond, but there's also the baby in the bond, that needs to be there. And also, talking about co-parenting and how that can be a challenge, and that they were glad that was mentioned also. And just good communication with mom. So yeah, just kind of solidifying things that we've already talked about, but keep talking in the chat, and we'll make sure that we add you in.
So these are, thank you all for your comments. These are some really excellent points. We have a second half, and in the second half, I think you're going to find, I have found some challenging ideas in that as well. I think that we'll have time at the end of the second half of the videos to kind of continue the conversation a little bit. So how about we start the second video here in just a moment. And I do want to say one thing though, as you watch these videos, and as I've watched them, what I've noticed is that many of the presenters start out as they tell their story. They start out from the point of view that their dad wasn't as present in their lives as they would have liked. And so the one gentleman that was the last speaker, he spent 30 years in this fatherhood field. And it was a result of his realizing how important it was for dad to be present because his dad wasn't. So I think that tells us a lot about the importance of this. And I thought that was an interesting point from these presenters.
In terms of understanding the key contributors to effective fathers, I think there are three pillars. There is marriage, there's employment, and there is parenting. And in order for fathers to be effective, they have to be working on those three pillars in terms of what they're doing. One of the things I get concerned about is I grew up without my father. That's how I entered this field in the first place. And that was a very challenging experience. It's really, really critical for me if fathers are going to be effective in the lives of their children, they are going to do it from the vantage point of maintaining a long-standing relationship with the mothers of their children. And so it seems to me that that's the pinnacle, that's the high point. But not everyone is positioned to have those long-standing relationships with the mothers of their children. And so in the absence of that, we're trying to do the next best thing to make sure that they have healthy relationships with the mothers of their children so that they can be in their children's lives when they're 3 and when they're 30. And so I think these three pillars, marriage and employment and parenting skills, are critical if fathers are going to be effective for their children, and importantly, if they're going to be effective for themselves. And I think men have to understand that. And importantly, practitioners and policymakers that are working with fathers, families, and children, they have to understand that as well. So from a federal perspective, the key components of effective fatherhood are marriage, employment, and parenting skills. So it's important from the vantage point of marriage that fathers have a long-standing relationship with their children, and there's no better circumstance in which that can occur than if fathers are married to the mothers of their children so that they can be engaged in their lives from the time they're born until the time they're going to college and then beyond then. Secondly, employment. Fathers have to have the capacity to maintain a stable relationship with employment, and then thirdly, parenting skills. From the federal perspective, it's important that fathers learn how to engage differently with their children depending upon how old their children are. Raising a 3-year-old is a very different exercise than raising a 30-year-old, but that's a lifetime job, and you have to have the ability to meet your children's needs as their children mature. So I think the field of responsible fatherhood has evolved over time. Initially, the concerns were primarily around maintaining relationships with children on the one hand and employment on the other hand, because we required fathers to make financial contributions to their children, and many of the fathers that we were concerned about at the time were, let's be clear, inner city African American and Latino fathers, because many of them were poor, they had strained relationships or not stable relationships with the labor market, and they were not able to meet their financial obligations, and as a result, they were under the gun of child support. And so those are the things with which we were primarily concerned. I think the field has evolved pretty dramatically in terms of the emphasis of employment versus the other components of responsible fatherhood. I think early on, particularly in the 1990s, the central focus of responsible fatherhood programming was employment, because the ability to pay child support depends upon whether or not the father has a stable job and high enough earnings to not only support himself but also to support his children. And curiously, the rounds of responsible fatherhood work have taken place often when there are recessions. And therefore, it's very difficult to work with low-skilled men, men who have high experiences with incarceration, and try to think about how to provide those fathers with stable attachment to the labor market with high earnings. And so one of the things that the field of responsible fatherhood has learned is that in the absence of a healthy economy, this unbridled focus on employment is ineffective. And therefore, responsible fatherhood has branched out to be concerned about other needs that fathers have as well. I think there can be more broad-based support around understanding, again, how to help men make long-standing attachment to employment and how to increase their earnings. And I think what has to happen here is that we have to be concerned about their human capital. And so the idea that men can maintain their child support obligations without more investment in their human capital is just not well supported in the literature, and we have to figure out how to increase their human capital as well. And again, the need to increase their human capital is universal, and we've seen this. The average hourly earnings of men in the United States have not increased since I graduated from high school, and let's just face it, that was a long time ago. And therefore, if we're going to increase the capacity of men to support their children financially, we have to figure out how to invest in their human capital, make sure that they have skills that are scarce and in demand in the labor market. And I think these are ideas that have to find their way into the field of responsible fatherhood, so that we're not expecting, to squeeze blood out of a turnip, but instead we're investing in their human capital and enabling them to have higher earnings.
What needs to happen for healthy relationship education to become a more salient force in society? I think first, society probably needs an attitude check for these programs to be stably funded. People have to recognize their importance, and for people to do that, they have to come to the recognition that these men are important and valuable, not just for their money, but for their love, their nurture, and their care. And so the message to society is stop treating these men as folks that don't care, and start respecting their potential role in their children's lives. As I've written about fathers really since the mid-1990s, and I used to get such resistance in my talks that I hired a photographer. And he went out in Philadelphia, where I had done my first project, and he took photos of fathers in the community with their kids. And so I started having a montage of these photographs behind me as I spoke. And I felt that it was only in that way that I could get people to hear their words. They had to see it. They had to see fathers in a different way. So that's really important. I think people are unified in saying we have got to do something different. A healthy relationship education is a key step in that process. But I think we need to dream bigger.
So my most current work is on parents who are alienated or estranged. So I think fatherhood programs can be really useful in connecting fathers to other fathers and helping fathers see how common these issues are. Fathers in particular, feel so alone with this issue. They feel so ashamed, they feel cut off, they feel like everybody thinks that they're a terrible dad, that their own children don't talk to them, or their own child doesn't talk to them. So again, these are fathers who are in enormous pain, and I think having a community that fatherhood projects can provide, and a way to learn how to communicate and work through common conflicts is a very important service that we can offer.
I think that a lot of times programs assume that they always know, what father's needs are from a day-to-day perspective. And every father is different, even though the practice of fatherhood is very similar. Once a father, has access and is engaged. And so it is very important that we understand how we recruit and retain fathers. And the key is understanding his needs and being able to respond to them. And it's a term that they use often in education. They call it being student-centered. When we have fathers in programs, we got to be father-centered or father-centric. And father-centric does not necessarily mean that you're anti-mother or women, but rather when he's in the fatherhood program, that he knows that you're there for him, you care about his concerns, you demonstrate that. He feels that when he comes to the program. What I say to practitioners all the time, you're trying to create an environment in your program where fathers run to the program and walk home. Well, I think that the greatest impact that we can have on fathers is to enable those fathers who are not actively involved in the life of their children to become involved in the life of their children. Because I think that as we think about fatherhood, what I want practitioners and others to put in the forefront as a target is children. Because what we're trying to do is create an environment in the life of their parents, in the life of their family and home, where that child can grow and develop and to reach their highest potential. And so the best thing we can do is to, again, help him overcome his barriers so he can be involved, because we have too many children who do not have the active and loving involvement of both parents in their lives. Well, I'm hopeful in the future that we will continue to do it. This is a life's work. Again, I've been doing it 30 years, and I only think that we've touched the surface of what can be done when it comes to responding to the needs of families and the needs of children. And when I mean families, I mean both mom and dad, but I also mean specifically children, because, children are our future. And having, loving parents and creating the environment in the home where a child is safe, secure, and happy is the recipe for success. And who knows that from that household may become the next president of the United States, or the person who comes up with the next great discovery on Mars.
My vision for the field is to really change the meaning of what a co-parent is, and to elevate the role of co-parent into a key social role, just like the role of spouse or employee is. This should be thought of as a sacred role. One of my friends in this field, a family court judge from Minnesota, even proposed that we have co-parenting relationships, kind of like civil weddings, where you vow to cooperate in the best interest of your child when you have a baby. As I said before, complex families are not going away. American families are highly complex. They're more complex than in other rich nations. And we need to be able to support children who come of age in complex families. And that means supporting this co-parenting role separate from any relationship the parents may or may not have with each other romantically. So that's my big vision, co-parenting as a key social role. And I'd love to see the fatherhood movement and the organizations and entities involved congregate around spreading that message. Some people say to me, "Why does the government and the private sector need to get involved in the family at all?" We need advocates and practitioners to continue to work in the interest of fathers every day. The reason is that our society is complex. Most children grow up in complex families. Those of us who have the privilege of having middle-class income and starting out our families within marriage have also struggled in our relationships, and we've had a lot of help. We can afford therapists. We can go to special classes. We can sign up for conferences. We may be part of faith communities that have marriage encounters. Everyone needs help. It's hard raising kids. It's hard sustaining a relationship in 21st century America. And often the resources that we take for granted as middle class people simply aren't available to families that are less fortunate and find themselves in much more complex and stressed situations. In my view, we need these advocates and practitioners more than ever in order to advocate for the kinds of skills and the kinds of supports that can help folks in complex relationships to thrive, both as partners and as parents.
My hope for the future, in terms of practitioners on the one hand and advocates on the other, is that they will have a consistent stream of resources to do their work. My hope is that maintaining local, state, and federal advocacy will come about in part by sharing the resources that are emanating at the federal level to state and local practitioners, and again, to make sure that the practitioners have a greater role in shaping local and national policy, and that's not going to happen in the absence of resources. And so I think the future of responsible fatherhood has everything to do with building the capacity of local responsible fatherhood programs who deliver services, but also delivering the advocacy, taking the lessons learned from the field and seeing how they can be translated into public policy, and that's the role of the advocates. I think the most important thing that researchers, policymakers, or practitioners need to know about working on behalf of the whole dad is that you have to be in it for the long haul. Often, because we know of the importance of the first 3 years of children's lives, we in the field of responsible fatherhood and in related fields tend to focus on young children. And young fathers and young families, because we know that if children, because children's cognitive development is on fire when they are between 0 and 3, that's where the most important work needs to be done. That is true. Nevertheless, we have to give fathers a long-term perspective on their children and what their relationships with their children are going to be about. Yes, they see a 3-year-old, but they have to see a 50-year-old. And how is it that they're going to be remaining in the lives of their children? We're doing the work in the moment, but the returns of that work are going to last for a lifetime. And we all have to be committed to that long-term return in order to have a proper perspective on the work that we're doing in the moment. That's what 27 years in this work will teach you.
My hope for the fatherhood movement, for those who are trying to help fathers, is to really be advocates for fathers. Fathers feel very isolated. They feel very alone. Many dads have misguided ideas about masculinity and being strong and being tough, but actually ends up hurting them and makes them much more isolated. It makes it harder for them to reach out. In my 1,600 person estranged parent survey that I did through the University of Wisconsin Survey Center, 90% were moms. And I know there's a lot of estranged dads out there because I have them in my practice, but they're not reaching out for help. So my wish is that we as a society can do a much better job in reaching out to these fathers, of giving them the tools, of giving them the language of how to reach out to their children, how to respond to conflict, and how to reduce the distance.
The reason why we need practitioners to champion fathers is because unfortunately, politicians have short memories, and that we have to make sure that we keep the fatherhood movement and the work with fathers alive and well. And that's only going to come through regular advocacy and regular educating of policymakers at the local, state, and federal level to make sure that they know that there are people out there concerned about fathers and that they want to make sure that anything that those legislators might need in order to continue to advance and promote responsible fatherhood, that we make sure that they get that information. You'd be surprised how many people don't know about the work that we do. And once I explain it to them, I always joke about that movie, Few Good Men. And at the very last scene, Tom Cruise is interrogating Jack Nicholson over his work in Guantanamo Bay, which is a tough situation. And he responds by saying, "You need me on that wall. You want me on that wall." And I would say that that's the same for us doing this fatherhood work. You need us on that wall. You want us on this wall. It's a difficult job, but somebody has to do it. But if we do it, the future is going to be bright for our children, and the future is going to be bright for our families.
What I'd like to do is take a quick moment and just kind of review again what we saw, what stood out for you in that clip. One of the things that I can tell you for myself was that the need to be intentional with services, advocating for fathers at the policy levels, also just as much as we do at the grassroots level when it comes to including fathers in the lives of their children. Let me know what stood out most for you all.
I have kind of an overall comment about this, and it really kind of relates to the Fatherhood Collaborative. So we just heard from like a number of experts who spent a lot of time studying, and they presented us with some really good ideas, some key ideas, and I think that part of the issue for us is that we just need to make these things, these concepts that we heard today, a part of our conversation that we have with men regularly. It needs to be part of the things that are like in the front of our consciousness, because when we tuck them away, we forget and we go back and men become less engaged, less involved. I love the Fatherhood Collaborative. The idea of it is that we are able to gather together and keep reinforcing these kinds of concepts that are important, that help men be engaged with their children, their schools, and their communities.
I find it interesting that in both the videos, they did talk about how mom and dad, they really need to behave themselves and get along for the sake of the children. And it's interesting because my dad growing up, he was workaholic, but he was still a good dad. And my husband is a good dad, but all of them, are married and have easy relationships. But my brother-in-law, who has been divorced for quite a while, that's the family I always look at, and I get the most encouragement from, because my brother-in-law is the best dad. And even though there are like major conflicts between him and his ex-wife, they set them down every day for those children. And they're all adults now, and that's when I was just on the West Coast, it was for one of their sons' weddings. And even during the wedding, there was no drama at all. I mean, they're all hugging and loving on each other. And I know the stories behind it all. So I know it has not been that easy, and that they don't really feel like hugging and loving on each other. But for the sake of the kids and the sake of the family, they set it down every day. And I think that's the dad I look at and think, man, he has just got it, because he has some pretty big obstacles, but yet he's doing it for those kids. And I think there's so much to be said about, just getting along for the sake of those children.
Thank you, Joanna. Any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, there were a couple of standouts for me. One thing that resonated was the quote, "The practice of fatherhood is similar, but every father's needs are different." And so, practicing father-centered programming, I thought that was a key point. And then also creating an environment where fathers run to your programming and walk home, where that what you're doing is interesting, engaging, helpful, and leaves them mindful and kind of processing as they make their way home on, what is this going to look like practically. And then fatherhood should be thought of as a sacred role. really resonated with me. I think motherhood is often sort of esteemed in that way, whereas fatherhood is seen more kind of workmanlike.
Mm.
And again, going back to being primarily there to earn. And and then the last two, just fatherhood, helping fathers to visualize their role in their children's lives over the course of their lifespan. And so seeing, approaching fatherhood, beginning with the end in mind. Um, and then lastly, just reaching out to estranged fathers. I was in court a few weeks ago, and a dad was, um, they were in the process of terminating his parental rights, but, um, for because the courts were sort of late in getting him involved, he was getting an extended stay, and hearing uh, and talk about reaching out to estranged fathers. I wish I had done more in that moment to get the young man's information, um, because he really did fit, so much of what was said in the presentation, just in terms of just being a young guy and and not having a whole lot, and how important it's going to be proactive and not necessarily wait on guys to seek you out,
Mm.
but when you see these opportunities to reach out and to connect, to take advantage.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. That's just a great overview on how fathers are being seen in our communities. I think that's one of the things from the court's perspective that when we talk about being intentional with services, we know that men are being summoned, subpoenaed to come to courts and trials, that type of deal. So maybe that's one of the things that we can look at as far as the advocacy piece in the future to start being more intentional, going to the closed places, whether it be the court systems, the athletic facilities, that type of deal where these kids are at. And we know where fathers are more likely to show up at. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm new to this and I couldn't find the little virtual hand thing. Couple things stood out to me. When we did that survey, and a lot of us said that the most important time was like middle school age or whatever. And the gentleman had mentioned the 0 to 3 being most important for like the development of a child. I thought that was interesting. And when he talked about the 3 pillars, and he included marriage as one of the 3 pillars, but I like that later he clarified it and said relationships, because most people are co-parenting. In the ideal world, we'd all be married, but that's not usually the case with a lot of the population that we deal with. And so I like that, even though he said marriage, he really meant, having good relations with the mother and father for the child's benefit. And when he talked about employment, and he said that we needed to teach people, to help them, be more employable. Like I forgot the term he used, but like have higher salaries so that people can afford to pay child support. He said not get blood from a turnip. That it seems like they try to get blood from a turnip, but teach them, better skills. Have them give them the ability to make more money. One of the things I thought of when he said that, I know in some states, I'm not sure about Florida, but I lived in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Texas. And when someone's behind on child support, they take away their license, like their driver's license, or they take away their professional license if they have one. And so why would you take away someone's ability to provide? How I think that's counterproductive. But so a couple of things stood out. Thanks.
Great comments. Thank you. All right. One of the things I wanted to talk about is like we're going to briefly just kind of talk about the different changes that we've not only experienced ourselves, but also research has shown us how the transition of fatherhood has taken place with, let's say, the past 10 to 20 years. And we're going to look at the fatherhood in the 70s, and I'm going to refer back to Mark, as he's one of our oldest fathers who's known to make some great coffee.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. I definitely was around before the 70s, no question about that. And I have some comments about it, but I just remember that was like, the stereotype of the dad. The father was it's like the Marlboro man, strong, silent, didn't have much to say, was a man of action. Um, as our clinicians have kind of gone back and looked at the 70s, what they have to say is that up until the 70s, the stereotype of fathers is that they were breadwinners and disciplinarians. And in American culture, social norms and laws kind of centered on mothers as the individuals who were principally responsible for children's social and emotional well-being. When children were born out of wedlock, there were few, if any, supports focused on helping the fathers develop any kind of meaningful relationships with their children, especially if they were estranged from their mom. Um, I think when we get into the 70s, things began to change a little bit in that respect. And maybe some of the stuff that might stand out would be that the scholars began to challenge the stereotypes with some new research. And that research talked about the idea that the previously accepted simple answers about fatherhood failed to explain some of the critical importance of fathers being involved further in their children's lives. Also revealed the lack of institutional, social, and cultural support for fathers to be engaged parents. By the 70s, we were seeing a more nuanced understanding of the value of fathers in general, but we were still struggling to define exactly what that meant in terms of a responsible, engaged father. Reggie, you're a young man. You probably don't really even have any experience in the 90s, but what do you think? You got anything to say about that? Oops, I think your microphone needs to go on.
I was making a reference that I had a lot more hair in the 90s. So I just want to put that out there. I haven't always been bald. I appreciate Michael Jordan and his efforts to include men of no hair. In 1995, the definition of fatherhood started to change. One of the things that they start to include that fathers started to wait before they started having children until they were more emotionally and financially prepared to have a child. They were more likely to establish legal paternity and actively share the child with the child in the upbringing, the raising from infancy up until middle school. I think that's one of the significance of areas that we need to look at there. But also that the child was seen as a focus on both mom and dad, and the dad took more of the financial concerns and more financial focus when providing for the child. That's one of the things that as we continue to keep looking in and researching fatherhood efforts today, finding out how we continue to keep evolving as fathers to become more inclusive in the parenting aspect. Today's research is saying that men are no longer just the breadwinners. Men actually are becoming the nurturers. In our program, we have multiple fathers who had become stay-at-home fathers. The roles have been switched. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some cultural differences that have some impacts on those type of things, but a lot more fathers are taking that nurturing role, spending time with their children, and really looking towards moms to support just as much or more for the financial concerns of their children. Mark, let's take a look at some of the research. You're on mute, Mark, excuse me.
Man, those are some of my best comments too. Yeah, so take a look at the statistics. It's just interesting to see that children who grow up when dads are involved are 60% less likely to be suspended or expelled from school. They're 2 times more likely to go on to college or trade school when dads are in their life as they're growing up. One that really resonates with me is the idea that when dads are present, boys and girls grow up with dads present in the household, there's 75% less likely to be a teen birth involved. And if we could stick on this slide for just 1 second, National Fatherhood Institute has some statistics that they put out, and there was one that I saw that kind of played off of this one that I want to share with the group, and it was that for girls, young girls who grew up in a household without a dad present, they were 75% more likely to have a child out of wedlock as well. And so when I saw that, it just began to impress upon me the generational impact that men have by being active and present. The idea that a young girl is so much more likely to grow up and also have a child without a man present is what was a powerful statistic for me. Moving on to the slides, when dad's present, children are, and I think they're probably talking predominantly about the sons, but 80% less likely to be incarcerated is a huge statistic. And when you combine these statistics onto one infographic, it just kind of really, for me, brings home the importance of the work that we do in encouraging men to be present, to be engaged, not necessarily to be in the house, but to develop the relationships, the co-parenting relationships that allow them to be present in their children's lives. It's a tremendous stabilizing effect that continues on into adulthood when men are present. It extends to their children's relationships, to their own personal mental health, and so on. Men with absent fathers are more likely to become absent fathers themselves. Women with absent fathers are more likely to have children with absent fathers. Strong evidence that a father's involvement has positive effects on children's mental health as adults. The bottom line is, when fathers are supported by the community and its members, they benefit from additional and more father-friendly services. This in turn reinforces that fathers matter both to their children and to their communities. So what do you think, Reggie? What comes next?
Well, I think that's one of the things, Mark, that just those statistics alone should be enough for us as community and service providers, and also policymakers, to really understand the importance of including fathers and supporting them. And as we talked about earlier, being intentional with our services. For us, as I work for the health department and we're funded also by JWP, we've been able to really focus on going out and being intentional with our services. And that's one of the things that's, it is a process. And I know that there are other programs such as yourself, your program, and also throughout our community, that we continue to keep working together, because it's taken a long time when we talk about our families, how they've kind of continued to remain in the same cycle. It's going to take a lot of energy, energy and commitment to provide services and give fathers opportunities to break those cycles. So we appreciate you all attending our workshop and continuing to participate with us. Mark, I think with the activity based on time, we can move forward with that.
Yeah, I think we can skip this part.
Yeah.
The great comments are,
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'd like to move on to our discussion questions. When we talked about just overall, what stood out for each and every one of us, and what can we do to be more inclusive, to be more intentional. And what I like to do is just kind of go around the room. If you can give a quick introduction on yourself and your agency and which services you provide, and then we'll wrap it up with a closure with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Anthony, we'll start with you.
All right. Hi, my name is Anthony Williams. I work for Operation PAR. I actually just started on Monday. And so I'm the new community educator / fatherhood advocate. I'm excited to be here. I was a teen father myself. I had my first child when I was 15 years old. And I was also a single parent, which is unusual for a single parent Black male. I raised two boys from like 7 years old to their when they got out of high school. So I am personally invested in. I'm also a certified peer recovery specialist, and so I have some some like lived experience with a couple other things that some of our fathers have challenges with, and so I'm excited about being on the team here with PAR, and excited to be on the Zoom here today. Thank you.
Mr. Anthony, thank you. And just praise to you, brother, for the work that you've done, not only with your personal life, but the work that you're reaching out and sharing with the men in our community. We'll move to Miss Angela.
Hello, I'm Angela Merck, and I'm an SSVF, which is Supported Services for Veteran and Families Employment Consultant out of the Boley Center here in St. Pete. And our agency, we assist with veterans and family members and help put them back to work. And right now we're in 6 different counties over here on the west coast of Florida. And my supervisor is Employment Manager Gregory Lewis Seals.
Thank you, Ms. Angela. We'll move to Mr. Anthony. Excuse me, I'm sorry, we're going, Mr. Carlos, excuse me.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Sr. I'm with the University of South Florida, the Family Study Center. And like Mr. Anthony, I am newly with the center. I've been with the center now for maybe a little over a month. And we are a team of clinicians that do research in the area of co-parenting. Center is led by Dr. James McHale. And then also there's a team of clinicians that work with families, especially families with children 0 to 3, helping them to navigate challenges surrounding co-parenting, developing strategies and coping methods for having healthy family systems so that we can better serve our children.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. That's a great organization you're working with there. Look forward to working with you in the future. All right, Ms. Kathy.
Hello, I'm Kathy Roof. I'm with Brady Neighborhood Family Center, and we're looking forward to getting started here with Reggie soon. We're trying to get us a men's program down here at our community in Rainbow Village. I was a single parent. I was widowed early with 3 children, and was fortunate enough later on to meet a man who was an excellent father for my children, so they had him through their teen and adult years. And so now I'm trying to be a part, to give back a little bit of that to the men in my community, because I know that there's some really good men down here that have had no support, and I'm looking forward to getting this program going with Reggie. And I'll talk to you on Monday, Reggie.
All right, good to see you, Kathy. Thank you. What about Mr. Cincino, if I'm saying that correctly?
Good afternoon. How are you guys doing? Right. I'm Cencio Minson. I'm the bilingual family support specialist at High Point Neighborhood Family Center. What I would like to bring, I guess, is kind of eliminating stigmas in both, like the way it's represented to like people outside of fatherhood and the way they feel about themselves. Because I realize a lot of times that some people may feel like, oh, this is what they think of me, so I'm just going to live up into the stereotype, and don't realize that they can break away from that and break generational curses, for lack of a better term, and kind of like do your own way of fathering in the way you want to rear your children, and not feel like you're pressured to perform a certain way, and then not feel like people are just wanting for you not to succeed because of the demographic you come from. And then also on the other side is like these dads that like But still obviously commendable every time. But these dads that have this thing of like, oh, I take care of my kids, I do these things, and like those are things you're supposed to do and be glad about it. But it's not like it shouldn't become too much of a point of like pride to where it gets your head too big because you're doing the job. You decide to have these children, so you should be taking care of them and kind of like meet those two in the middle, so that so that I feel like all fathers feel like their needs are being met in the way they want to rear, and like the childhood they may have had to try to change that to where maybe they didn't know their father and now they're trying to do their best to be a father, but maybe they don't have those tools or that guidance that they needed, but they really want to do it, but aren't given the chance.
Great, thank you. And if you want to pass it on to the gentleman to yours.
Oh yeah, go.
Hello, my name is Fred Green. I'm operations manager here at High Point Neighborhood Family Center, and just to briefly kind of add on to what Cynthia said, a big part of what we do, we have after school and summer programs for kids, and so a big thing for us is really trying to get family engagement, and especially family engagement when dad is involved and dad is around, and kind of remembering that there are ways that in which we can talk to and embrace families and make dad feel like part of the conversation. So I think that's a really important thing, because when we do that, when we're mindful of that, then we see dad kind of show up more often. And so like Cynthia and I, for instance, will have sometimes one-on-one conversations with dads because we're both dads. And so we'll there's a lot of common ground. And so I think that's a big part of our approach. And especially in, being that we're in social services, is that there's no other men in the building. And so oftentimes, dad might just kind of stay kind of in the back and be quiet until one of us approach and kind of open that dialogue, and then the attitude and the mood changes. And so we've noticed that it can be very helpful to kind of make that first step and embrace having those discussions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What is Miss Glory? Moving on to Glory. Okay. We'll come back to her. What about Judith, Miss Judith?
Hi there. I had to find the right button to unmute myself. I'm the OB clinical nurse navigator for Morton Plant Meese, and the way that we've been involved just recently is we restarted our boot camp for new dads. It's a virtual class that we're offering through baycareevents.org. And we've been able to find a way to offer it for free for the Healthy Start dads. So it took a while. It was a little challenging, but they worked it out for us. And so we've been having a class for a couple months now. It's offered twice a month, and more and more men are signing up for it. It was a really great class that was offered in person up till everything was shut down in March of 2020. So we're really excited about that.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm with JWB. I'm a senior program consultant, and I have the utmost pleasure to work with a few of you folks on the line today, like with Healthy Families with Reggie and Miss Kathy down at Grady. I'm just so grateful for seeing how this work has evolved over the past few years. I know it even impacts my life personally. I'm a bonus mom, and I see the struggles that happen, and you see the co-parenting challenges that exist out there. And I have a fantastic husband who does everything like what the literature says, but I see, gosh, how challenging sometimes that can be. And I think the more we can equip people with the skills needed to kind of overcome kind of our inherent nature of how we want to react to things, and give them, a toolkit to navigate some of these issues more appropriately. I'm grateful that this work is existing out there.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Miss Michelle, are you there?
I sure am.
All right.
I work with Healthy Start Coalition of Pinellas, and like you just heard from Judith, we have been able to figure out how to have this boot camp for new dads class available to our fathers for free. And at the coalition, we have two programs, a Healthy Start program and a Parents as Teachers program. And we always, I will say, for the last 5 years, we've been very inclusive. We've been really figuring out that fathers want to be part of the home visit. They want to be able to be part of just everything that we do. If we do any activities, any group connections, we just treat them like they're just part of what they're supposed to be there. You know, we don't think it's a separate thing. It's just part of the program. So I'm just glad that now they have other goodies for them, like the boot camp for dads, and it's just guys talking. So, you know, I think it's going to be very good.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Thomasina.
Okay. Hi, I'm Thomasina Oliver Jackson with PIMS. I've been here over 11 years in various positions, but right now I'm working the new Access FSI Connect program that started in April. And just really glad to be part of this group, and just excited when I get a couple of men calling in, needing assistance and saying that they have their children in care, and that's a really good experience. So thank you again for today. It's been a really good program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
My name is Desmond Newton. I'm a senior program consultant at the
Desmond, how are you there?
I'm doing pretty good. I learned a lot in this group. This is one of my first times in a long time since I attended one of these groups. But I think, you know, within this space, there's been a lot of progression. I'm a father myself. I have 2 sons and a daughter, ranging from like 25 to 5. So I kind of been through the whole gamut when it comes to the kids and raising them. Also work with a little bit with fathers in some of my previous positions, you know, just within the community. But you know, I'm glad to be a part of this process. Learned a lot, and you know, in regards to the progression of how fathers are viewed, you know, within the community, within the whole, you know, scientific space, and so I'm glad to be here and learn a lot about this the whole initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. If we don't have anyone else, we'll go ahead and we'll move to Mr. Lawrence to close us out. I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Healthy Families Father Services and Gold Medal Dads program. Thank you for just attending with us. And for me personally, I was raised in a home without a father, and I vowed to become the dad I wish I would have had. And I've done that, and I'll continue to do that. And as we talk more about that continuation of services from zero to fatherhood towards our end, we want to continue to keep working together. And our brother Lawrence is going to share some information with you and some invitations. And we look forward to working with you, everyone, in the future. But thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
All right, thanks, Reggie. I just wanted to share some takeaways and then transition over to Joanna to go into some of the upcoming items. But one of the key things that we talked about is that involved dads have a direct impact on their children's future. And we saw statistics showing involved fatherhood is linked to better outcomes on nearly every measure of child well-being. Another takeaway is that families are strengthened by supporting fathers. And with the speakers that were, you know, talking, a lot of them kind of resonated that fathers want to be present. And so I want to pose a question to you and your organizations is how can we help them achieve that? Now, policies and programs specifically for dads are on the rise. And for those of you that have worked with me, I'm pretty big on that advocacy because I know that in order to get change and to have it be permanent, we have to work through policy and enact laws. Now, the state of Florida recently passed legislation that centers on responsible fatherhood and fatherhood services. And so I asked the question of you, what kinds of advocacy is your organization doing centered around responsible fatherhood? Now, we also learned that dads find immense value from the participation in programs. We learned that we want them to, run to us and walk home. And we also know that the support fathers find among other dads, the guidance they receive from program facilitators, and the community resources and supports that they access keep them coming back. And there was a question or something that Reggie mentioned earlier that kind of resonates and centers around that. And it's, we have to meet dads where they are. We're in a society now where there's diversity. We talk about diversity, and that can encompass a lot of different things. Are we going out into the communities? Are we virtual? Are we this? Are we that? What are we doing to meet dads where they are? And then the question that I would love for each of you to take back to your organizations is, are our programs, services father-centric? And that was a key word that was mentioned towards the end of the speakers. And are they also working on behalf of the whole dad, which is another thing that I picked up that resonated with me, because when we talk about kids, we talk about their social and emotional well-being, but we also have to focus on fathers, because as dads, we can't pour from an empty cup. So if we don't take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, we can't be there for our kids. So are we, as program providers and service providers, father-centric and working on behalf of the whole dad? And so I hope that when you go back, to speak with your coworkers, you present some of these things and begin to have those conversations. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Joanna to bring it on home.
Right. I think that was a great training. I'm really glad that we gave it the time that we gave, because I think there's a lot of information that we can take back to our organizations and hopefully keep in mind while we're doing that. I am actually going to first ask, I'm glaring, are there anybody that has any activities or any events or anything, updates on your organization that you want to share? We'll start there. Well, I'm glad you're all being quiet now instead of earlier.
Well, I know that we have an annual event, our annual breakfast, and hopefully the people that know about it already signed up, because it's been sold out. But we're going to, the entire community has been invited. The maximum we can have is 150 because of, we want to be safe. And this time we're celebrating doulas, which is a birthing coach. That's another word for a doula. And we're celebrating the work of doulas. And our doula, we do have one full-time doula that Baker funds. She always makes sure that daddy's there. We have lots of pictures with daddies through the birth, and it's just fantastic the way that she works with daddies through the pregnancy and all that good stuff. I love to watch him. She even has videos of mom and dad dancing in the labor and delivery room. So it's just, we try to do our best.
Is that like slow dancing or fast dancing? I'm just trying to envision that. That's great. Any other updates for any of our partners, collaboration people? I just didn't want to cut you guys off, so I thought I'd let you go first. Okay, then I'm going to ask Reggie, can you give us any updates that you might have from your subgroup?
Our committee, we're working on training, different trainings that work on father engagement. And we're also looking to partner with other agencies to develop smaller mini groups. I know that with the Rainbow, hey, Dr. Cho, how are you? With Rainbow Village, we're reaching out and we're initiating a small group of fathers. And because one of the things that we know in talking with Kathy, we know that fathers are there. So we're just encouraging everyone to get out and just help support these smaller groups. And then at some point in time, I would like for our goal to be to bring all of our agencies together and our participants of Pinellas County, and to bring all those men and father or father figures together and really show the support and share the support that we have throughout our county.
Any other updates? Or is that it, Reggie?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. Since I'm trying to wrap her up. Okay, so we for the other subgroup that we have that actually we are doing several daycares this next week where we're going to just kind of spread the word and love on dads. The 2 Operation PAR, we're also going to Azalea. There's going to be a movie that will be later on this month. So we're kind of just trying to get the word out there. We also have some new items that if you guys have events, I'm trying to pull it out here, that you can get. Like this is a slap bracelet and it has our logo on it. We also have a hot and cold pack, also with the logo on it. A small Frisbee, and we have a large Frisbee. If you guys have any events that, are geared towards dads, or you might have a lot of dads there, or you just want to get some to hand out, you can actually send me an email and we will connect and I will have stuff ready for you. There are also, we're still talking about doing some type of nice polo that's, good for when it's out hot and everything. I still need to get some sizes. So if anybody's on the steering committee, subcommittees, and you want one of those, just send me your size. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for putting my email. I can stop trying now while I'm talking. She's so awesome. We love Jamie. And I think that's pretty much what's going on in that group. We do want to do some more outreaches. There's some discussion. We're trying to do we have some new talking points we need to go over. We weren't able to meet this month, but hopefully we'll be able to meet before the big group meets again. And I think we meet in a quarter. I don't know if we set up that date yet or not. I forgot to look, but I will make sure. So I think that's pretty much what's going on. Did anybody think of anything? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Joanne, as I listened to some awesome comments here. So Father and Family Council does Dad's Club. We're in schools. And what we find is really important is that as we're meeting with dads, it's great to talk about stuff, but we need to challenge our dads with next steps. And so if that happens to come up and becomes an availability, we're doing Dad's Clubs in schools. The idea is we help dads understand how they can engage with their children. It's in elementary, middle, and high school. Ages change. It's a little more difficult in middle school and high school. But here's the point. If a dad is looking for a next step, being a part of the Dad's Club at his children's school is a great next step for that dad to be engaged with his kids. And for those that are particularly motivated, we're looking for team leads, the men who will lead the Dad's Club in their children's school. So that's coming up. We're going to start in a number of schools in August, and we're excited about that.
Very good. Okay, I am going to give you a gift of time, believe it or not, and that will be probably out 12 minutes by the time y'all get off. But if nobody has anything else, last moment. All right. Thank you very much. It was a really good training. We will be sending out some, probably another survey, and I'll get you the survey results from the last one. So thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend and a happy early Father's Day to all our fathers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.